So this phrase I got from a good friend of mine called Terry Gorski, who's an old school drugs counsellor. He's passed on now, but we got Terry over to Chiang Mai in, must have been 2010, 2011, somewhere around there when we were first setting up the rehabs. And he was really popular in Asia for some reason, because I think the UNODC, the United Nations Office of Drugs and Crime, was mounting a big, lots of funding for Asian countries, everywhere from the Philippines to Maldives, Sri Lanka, those kinds of places, to mount drug treatment programs as, I guess, a countermeasure as part of the drugs war in the big eradication campaigns that America was involved in promoting in Asia back then. You know, opium eradication in the Golden Triangle, for example. So along with that eradication campaign went an education and treatment campaign. So lots of money going into Asian countries, governments, to train social workers and psychiatrists and drugs counsellors. And Terry's method of relapse prevention was very popular in those countries. And so we figured if we got him over to talk at a 2-day conference, do a load of education and training, that we'd get a lot of professionals from Asia, and it would be good promotion for our new rehab. So that's what we were doing. And I was driving around with Terry around Chiang Mai, just chatting. He said something, we must have been talking about work, and he said something like, yeah, don't listen to the balanced life Nazis. And I thought, that's a great line. I must remember that. And it accords completely with how I've always seen things, because I've always been quite a driven person. Some people would probably say a workaholic. You know, 60, 70, 80-hour weeks, especially when I've been building a project, are not unusual. And so I was thinking about that this morning, and I think it's something that isn't said much to young men in particular, who I would argue it is their natural prerogative to arrive, to make it, to do something big. Perhaps this is more the prerogative of men. I suspect it is. I'm not saying there aren't women that are like that, but lots of men are. And I feel like they get the message that that's kind of not very healthy or something. And the only two people I've ever really heard explicitly counter that would be Terry back then, and more recently I heard Elon Musk say something similar, like if you want to build something like a company, you're not going to be doing 40, 50-hour weeks. It's a ridiculous idea that you'll be able to have a balanced life if you're going to do that. So if we were to explore that, I'd also say it's perhaps not particularly, for example, a Buddhist idea. You know, Buddhist countries, thoroughly Buddhist countries, not nominally or once Buddhist countries like China that have now, and Korea that have now adopted a very Western mindset, but traditional Buddhist countries like Thailand, I don't know if that's particularly a particularly virulent strain in their thought at all. I think it is a Judeo-Christian idea, the idea of working brutally hard to achieve great things, whether that be a company, business, industry, or indeed art, music, or if you want to do great things as an athlete or something like that. So the idea of sacrificing pretty much everything to become successful it does seem to be more a Western thing. And to be clear, I'm not advocating sacrificing pretty much everything. Obviously, if the only way you can build that company as a 25, 30, 35-year-old is to take heaps of cocaine, then you're missing the point. Something's wrong. Likewise, if your marriage is going down the pan, same thing. So within reason. let's discuss this idea. So I'd say it's a natural prerogative of any young man who has talents. In fact, I'm going to call them gifts. So if you have a gift, the clue is in the word. It's to be given. It's not to be kept. So immediately the idea that this is really just about financial success and prestige therefrom is challenged, because even if the person thinks that's what it's really about and that's what they're chasing, I'm not sure about that. So it definitely is a kind of primate prerogative to get higher branches to sleep on, right? So that's the monkey equivalent of us being high-resourced individuals. So high-status monkeys get higher branches to sleep on. That means their offspring don't get taken away by predators or infected with parasites, etc. Our human version of that is we strive to become high-resource individuals so that our children, our family can live in a nice neighborhood, continue to develop themselves, and the family continues to expand after we've died. So that's one driver, of course it is. That's the natural primate drive, is to become a high-resource person, if possible. Not at any cost, but, you know, all other things being equal. But there is another strand of this, which is the satisfaction of accomplishment and this idea of the gift, which is quite a Jungian idea from Carl Jung. The idea that especially if you're an artist, a poet, a painter, a writer, but I guess you could put engineers or people who build companies in the same category as creative. It brings something into the world and hopefully makes it better. The idea is that if you don't manage to get that out of you and given to the world, to other people, then you'll become sick. So midlife crisis, pathologically frustrated, unhappy, depressed and angry, those kinds of things. And you don't want to be those kinds of things. You want to get this gift out and give it to the world. So my example of that would be two writers, George Orwell and Friedrich Nietzsche. So neither of these guys were, and this is proof of what I was just saying, neither of these guys were really recognized in their lifetimes. Okay, despite the fact that they must have known that their writing was amongst the highest caliber of writing that's ever been done in history. They must have known that because they were top-tier artists, so they must have had the ability to understand how good their writing was. Right? And yet neither was really recognized to anything like the level they should have been whilst they were alive. So you would think that that would be utterly, horrendously soul-destroying. And I'm sure to some extent on certain days it probably was for both of them. Because they're human, and humans aren't purely noble all the time. But here's the thing, I suspect that there was a certain level of satisfaction of job done. Because on the most basic level, they did their job, which is that they had a gift. They would have worked horrendous amounts of hours in order to have achieved that level of excellence. Make no mistake about that. They didn't live a balanced life. If they had have done, they never would have got that level of work done. It would have been impossible. So they sacrificed, if not everything, certainly a lot, in order to produce that art. And on some level, I suspect they were satisfied, because it would have been far worse if that work had never been produced and just the talent and the gift was stuck inside of them. Right, so that's proof of the fact, for my eyes, that it's not just the prestige that you're seeking if you're doing this properly. There's a certain amount of satisfaction of having actualized yourself, would be the therapeutic word for it. Whether the world takes that on or recognizes it is the world's job. That's not your job. Your job is to produce the goods. And for something of that caliber, that's not going to be done with 40-hour weeks. So you can't listen to the balanced life Nazis. You can't. There's even an element, I would say, of crabs in the crab bucket with this. You know, this is your Mr. Average, Mr. Ordinary, Mr. Can't be bothered really, who does a job he hates, telling you to be more like him. Right, it's a bit like when a really overweight girl says to a not overweight girl, oh, you're too thin. You know, you hear that a lot. Oh God, oh, you look great, but you're a bit too thin, you should eat more. What they're saying really is, don't make me look bad. It's the same thing with guys, oftentimes, is you should have more fun, you should have more hobbies, these types of things, to which I'm thinking, well, I don't know about that. I'm quite happy doing what I'm doing, investing this amount of time in my passion and being somewhat extreme, because I don't think it can be done any other way. And so, and there's a certain amount of Mr. Yoga teacher, sort of hippie inflected values here in this kind of thing, which again, I think this is an import from another culture. You know, this is not really our culture. That's more kind of like Buddhist culture, which is fantastic, but it's not our culture. And I don't know if somebody who has great talents and gifts and abilities is going to be satisfied by the fact that they have a lot of really interesting hobbies. You know, I'm not sure if that's going to cut it. So beware of people telling you to live a balanced life when you know full well that that's not what you want to do. And you know, quite realistically as it happens, that this thing you want to do is going to take extraordinary amounts of hours to achieve. Now here's the trick. If it feels kind of easy, like falling off a log, to do this work or this project of yours, then you're on the right track. Notwithstanding, of course, that there'll be moments of extreme exhaustion and disillusionment, which there will be. But apart from that, that most of the time, this 60, 70, 80 hours of work doesn't feel like it, because you're doing what you want to do. Now all these other crabs in the crab bucket, they're probably doing 40-hour jobs and are more mentally exhausted than you are, because they hate what they do. So of course they're going to say, live a balanced life. Because in a way, they're not really living a balanced life, because they're not doing what they want to be doing. They hate it, and therefore they wish to minimize the suffering. And their only way out of that, because they can't stand on their own 2 feet, they have to work at something they hate, is to obviously enlarge their lives with hobbies and things. And that's actually probably what they should do. That's probably sensible. That's what I would do if I was, for some reason, stuck work that I hated. And of course I would actualize by being really interested in mountain climbing at the weekends or something like that, and put all my efforts into that. That makes total sense. So in a sense, I'm not knocking that. But if you have got a standout talent and gift, or you really, really want to do something special, you want to leave your mark, which again, there's probably some kind of natural imperative there, along the lines of immortality or something. It probably is quite egotistically driven, but it's what drives us forwards to achieve things, right? So if you're built that way, then perhaps you have to grab it with both hands, and perhaps that comes with a cost. So then let's look at what the worst cost could be, which presumably would be lack of time spent with family, something like that. More serious than not ever developing hobbies, for example. Time with your kids, for example. Well, I didn't find that, because what I did is I just roped up my daughter into what I was doing. Again, we didn't follow that balanced life Nazi philosophy of attend to the children's needs by doing all the things that they want to do. No, I pulled her into my interests, which at the time were cold water swimming and hill running and things like that. And as a 7, 8-year-old, she would find herself swimming around in Hampstead ponds in November or something, you know, for half an hour. And lo and behold, Fast forward to the age of 20, she became a lifeguard on Brighton Beach and loves that lifestyle. So in actual fact, if you have a compelling vision of life that you are uncompromising about, there is actually no reason to leave your children behind as unintentional victims of that obsession. You can pull them into it. Again, as you'll see to some extent, entrepreneurs like Elon Musk doing, taking his kids around the businesses and so on and so forth, doing what he can to pull his loved ones into his life, because to be fair, and I remember reading I think it was a biography of Nelson Mandela where his daughter was complaining bitterly about what a poor father he was. Well, he was in prison for 30 years. For the people, whether you agree with him or not, looking back now, retrospectively, I'm not sure that he was a pure cut and dried hero figure, but let's just say he was a man of principles, right? And he suffered for what he believed in. So what he was doing was for the whole country, and to some extent his family was sacrificed for that. So that's the other level, is this big thing that you are pursuing in fact even more important than your nuclear family? Because there will be certain men for whom that is true, and then they have the terrible decision of which to prioritize, and being great men, they make the right decision, I would say, which is to prioritize their nation or their community even over their family. That is the ultimate sacrifice, and it's actually a sign of selflessness. And again, that's not to say there won't be little strains of egotism and prestige seeking in there, because people are human, but if there were, that would not in itself negate the overall sacrifice that they're making, right? So it's a complex thing, but I would say if you know that you really wish to put these amounts of hours into things, and it just feels right, you want to do something a bit bigger than the ordinary, then come to terms with the reality of the fact that that will not be accomplished by doing a 40-hour work week and having lots of different interests and hobbies. And much like men who once probably would have sailed off for literally years seeking their fortune, and in many cases not even come back, that is the kind of spirit that's alive in you. Luckily, you probably don't have to do that these days. You just have to work really hard, and you will miss some things. There are ways that you can make up for that, but it is likely that if you don't do that, here's the cost. You will wind up middle-aged, angry, resentful, very jealous, envious and backbiting of other guys who have achieved considerable things, and that's not who you want to be.